you feel like you are losing your grip, might suffer a trip or abandon ship, open a can of whatever you sip and join the fellowship.
Hello, and welcome to. Alan, maybe you want to. You've switched your mic off. That's great. I was hearing myself back. I don't like the sound of my own voice. Welcome to the Fellowship of the Ring Pool, our weekly discussion about things that matter in music and music that matters, not least music makers. I'm speaking to you live and direct from the Alps, where I've been subsisting on a diet entirely made up of fondue for its restorative qualities, and I hear it's very slimming as well. I also am a recovering redhead, which is why my face is this colour. This is roughly 15 minutes work in the sun. And I'm kind of camouflaged with the back wall. That wall isn't actually red, it's just the reflection of the back of my neck. Lots to talk to you about tonight, and those of you not familiar with the format, what I tend to do is just do a bit of a waffle for about 10 minutes to set up maybe a talking point, but often the discussion goes off in different directions. And then what we do is invite anyone who wants to take part on board via the Google Meet, which is linked in the video description down below. You will see and hear regulars, but it's not by invite, it's just people who like to join in every week. This doesn't mean it's a closed club, a clique, so do join. And actually, when I do see faces I haven't seen before, I tend to say hi to you, but I won't throw you in the spotlight if you're not interested. But just do join in the conversation, put some questions or answer some questions. So before I get on to subject matter, just a reminder that we do these composer challenges, which is to give you as close to real world kind of experience of working as a media composer. That's a composer for music, television, computer games, but it's an even broader field these days with podcasts and branding and all of that kind of stuff. And we asked you guys to do a piece of reality TV music using the I forget the name of the guitar. Is it bridge guitar? It's a free vault. And basically what we liked about this vault, it has a kind of muted sound, this guitar, is what we liked about it is it's a potential replacement for the eponymous pizzicato strings that we've been hearing on reality TV, but we think it started with 6 Feet Under, Thomas Newman in the 1990s. We're not asking you to do 1990s reality TV music, but if you want some references, just go to internet. There's just loads of stuff on there. And what we're looking for is not an impressive composition, is a piece of underscore. And that doesn't mean a quiet piece of music. It just means a piece of music that sits well under dialogue. So that, I think, is stuff like repetition, not too thematic, but also picking a register and frequency range that doesn't interrupt dialogue too much. Something that is very stereo, so it's wide of the dialogue, that kind of stuff. Now, if you're looking for further guidance, because we've extended this challenge period with basically a clarifying brief, which happens in the real world. If you're looking for some help, Simon Fife, who's the moderator of this podcast, has kindly done us a post, which is linked in the video description down below. These posts are part of I think calling it a blog is underselling it, but part of the resources section of the crowhill.com website, which is designed to be a safe house, a place to come to pick up inspiration, ideas, tutorials, opportunities, and hopefully to make connections yourself. So if you haven't joined us at Crowhill, please do, and do subscribe to this channel. I'm going to cross that one off. We've got a new vault, came out about half an hour ago, and the video is going great guns. It's vintage strings, so it's some of our proper string samples, but put through all sorts of naughty tape machines and stuff. And Theo's done a wonderful walkthrough, so do check that out. That's on this channel as well. It'll be the video, the last video out, and I cannot wait for next month's vaults, because it's It is actually by coincidence there's a very, very tight personal connection for me, and one that very much ties in with my somewhat odd sense of humor. It's just so cool that we've got access to this very, very special instrument. So again, subscribe and hit us up for, on the mailing list on the crowhillcompany.com. Piano Book, which is our kind of sibling side hustle, the largest collection of free samples on the internet today. You'll see that things are starting to move again with that project. So do head along there. And there's also, I put up some strings that I just kind of found down the back of the sofa, which I'm really happy with. So head along to there, check it out, pianobook.co.uk. On that note, something that really makes, to call Piano Book just a collection of free samples is underselling it by a huge amount. For me, it's about collaborations and connections. That's been the surprise outcome of Piano Book. Something that Simon actually set up on Piano Book was us using demos submitted by people who are using the samples as their means of thanks for I've just lost my screen. There we are, back again. As a means of people thanking the people who made these sampling instruments. And you may or may not have noticed on the last video that we put up on this website, which is about GUIs. It's a little bit boring, so we needed some music. But what was really nice is we got to use a couple of pieces of music by people who'd submitted them to Crow Hill. One of them, who's a regular on discussions here, Ellery. So if you're fiddling around with some of our instruments and stuff and would like to submit some demos, possibly that we could use on the product pages, but also in our videos, we always put credits up on the screen, so it is a good bit of exposure for you. There's two ways of doing it. We're going to have a submissions form set up soon for the website. The website's still relatively new, so email it to hello@thecrowhillcompany.com, or you can send it to us via SoundCloud, which sounds very clever to me. I've never done that, but if you use SoundCloud, you'll know how to do it. So that's that. Also, Marshall Brass, I try not to hawk too many Crow Hill sample libraries, but it is how we keep this whole thing moving along and how we pay our wages and put food on the table. So if you want to support us, we've got a bunch of merch on our shop page, which is currently called Tools, but we're going to change that to Shop because people don't know what it is. But also, we've reintroduced Marshall Brass with a reintroductory promo price, which ends on Sunday. So just wanted to let you know about that. A lot of people are really loving that library, as do I. That's not me just saying that because we made it. Well, a little bit, maybe. But we put a lot of effort into these things, and it's quite a unique and beautiful library. Check it out. Just to also let you know about the podcast, we're kind of fiddling around with how we distribute it. You can get it on all podcast platforms, and what we do is we kind of edit it down from this. I'm in a hotel, so there is people coming through a corridor next to me. So what was I talking about? What was I talking about, Alan? Can you remember before I was interrupted by the pesky little poodle?
You were talking about how we distribute the podcast, and we're going to fiddle.
Yes. So, thank you, mate. So yeah, podcasts. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's on Spotify, and all of the usual podcasts. If you just want to listen to it and do your washing up to us, then you can do that. But we've optimized it for audio, basically, and in so doing, it's slightly edited. What I'm going to start doing is instead of kind of waffling at the beginning of the podcast, I'm going to do a short monologue, which I think people have said they kind of miss from the original channel. So basically what happens is in the live section of the site, it's kind of the live and uncut version, warts and all. And then on Sunday mornings, we put out the podcast version, which goes on the main site, just to let you know what's going on there. Right. I'm on holiday And it reminded me, and it made me very, very sad, because I have few regrets in life, and I just wanted to tell a story. And that was that I was approached by a director. I just worked as I was called in on the cavalry on a massive, like, fantasy fiction film. And because I'd done an okay job in like a couple of weeks, a massive 90-piece orchestra, it was about 80 minutes of music. The producer put me in touch with her husband, and he was talking about doing a film and wanted me to come on board. It became clear to me that he was a very frustrated musician, and actually music was his love, but not necessarily love of listening to music. He, I think, at some point had dreamt of being a pop star. So there was immediately a sense of a chip on the shoulder about it. And I think what he probably subconsciously wanted to do was project his regrets about that particular. I mean, he's a successful director, and he's actually directed one really amazing film about music. What he decided, I think, to do subconsciously was to make my life a living hell and regret that I'd ever taken up this job. And in fact, the outcome of this particular job led me on a path to thinking about retiring, which is when I set up this podcast, when I set up this vlog, this channel, YouTube channel, was because I just wanted to be kind of honest, but not too negative about things. And I hope this isn't a negative thing. But anyway, he put me through the ringer, and we were on like version 25, version 26, version 27 of like Q1 MO1. Things were dragging. I knew that everything was going to crunch into a heinous mess at the beginning. But something I had told him at the beginning of the process was that I was getting married, and I was going on a very short honeymoon, which was less than a week, and that I would need that hiatus, which was understood at the beginning. And then I got married, and that weekend, so the night after I got married, he sent me an email saying, "I'm not sure if this is working. I think that we may have to go elsewhere, particularly if you're going to go on honeymoon, because we're running out of time." So the editor got in contact and said, "Is there any way that you can," because influential guy, I was still relatively wet behind the ears at this point. I hadn't done Poirot, I hadn't done, the big franchises that I'm very proud of. So the editor said, is there any way next week you can just pop back for a one-on-one meeting with him and actually just play him some different sounds and stuff to placate him? Because the editor had vouched for me as well, and his neck was on the line. So on my honeymoon, I left my wife with a 1-year-old baby, and she was very pregnant at the time. I left my honeymoon to come back for a meeting. I placated the director. He turned up 2 hours late for the meeting as well. It makes me really sad thinking about this, because I really don't have many regrets in life, but this is something I really, really, really regret. This really makes a lesser man of me, or maid. So anyway, we did we got it through, this, that, and the other. He persuaded me to orchestrate it myself, because he didn't want to pay for an orchestrator. We went into British Grove Studios, at which point I think that he became incensed that I had this kind of relationship with musicians who clearly knew me and I worked with a lot, and he wanted to take over. And he heard me mention the word sol pont, and he said, "What does sol pont mean?" I said, "Oh, sol ponticello. It's just for this scary bit. It's kind of a metallic sound. We'll play close to the bridge with the violins." So he got that in his head, and he thought that sounds fancy. And he just kept on walking out into the control room, costing us precious minutes. And he'd say, "Just can we try this sol ponticello?" which is a mispronunciation. I'm not usually snobby about these things, but it was just wonderful to hear him say that wrong. So we ended up with recordings that I had spunked my fee on, which he'd persuaded me to do, on an entirely Saul Pont score for what was a kind of sexual thriller with lots of lush romantic stuff. So we had to bin the entire recording session. And my lasting memory of the experience was, for a lot of these independent movies, the big blockbusters, they're pre-sold to exhibitors and whoever's going to put it on, whatever, streamers, or in those days DVDs and this, that, and you pre-sell based on the fact that it's got, Tom Cruise, this, that, and the other. This independent movies, what happens is you kind of have to make them. You get them financed, and you hope that you get that finance back, and directors and producers get, properly paid at the point you sell it. So you do sales screenings, what a lot of these film festivals is about. And just a lasting memory for me was the screening kept on being interrupted by the sound of the door slamming at the back of the auditorium as these various different representatives from different cinema chains and TV networks and this, that, and the other left. And when the lights came up, myself, the director, the producer, and the music supervisor were the only people left in the auditorium. And I'd left my honeymoon for this film, and they had every right to leave because it was a piece of utter shit. So that's quite a long way of saying that's the thing I regret the most in my professional career. Probably one of my biggest regrets, that and never flying Concorde in my personal life as well, because it went into my personal life. So I wonder, and I'll get more positive because I think it'll be interesting to talk not just about the regrets of saying yes. Do you have any regrets of saying no? And I'd be interested to see how that kind of balances up. Do you regret not getting the job? Do you regret saying no to the job? Do you regret missing what you thought was an opportunity versus the things that you regretted doing and the sacrifices you made? So that's something that I'd like to open up to the discussion that's about to come on board. Finally, it's always good to throw a couple of different talking points in. What happens every week is Alan and Simon have a little look at the comments that come up on the screen, in the video descriptions, and social media, and fire me a question from the audience. What do you have for me this week?
This week we've got the question is: have you ever done a gig in extreme weather conditions? So very hot or cold, wind or rain? I've got one.
Okay, and I'll throw it back at you in a minute. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I've got two. That one's not a weather condition, one is. So I'll do the non-weather condition, then you do your one, and then I'll do my one, if that's okay. I mean, the immediate answer is, of course I fucking have. I'm a tart. So the first one, though, I was with a band. Well, I wasn't with a band. I was deputizing. So coming in as the cavalry, I thought they'd have parts for me to play or some chord charts and stuff, but they didn't, and I didn't really know the tracks they were playing. So I sat in the green room. We did a sound check and sat in the green room with the guitarist and just wrote all of the chords down and on a bunch of bits of paper that I then sellotaped to my keyboard. Problem was, no one had a pen. And so I went to one of the people behind the bar and asked for a pen. And the only pen they had was a red biro. Got on stage, much more confident. It was simple music. It's just read the chords fine. But I don't have perfect pitch or anything. I'm not particularly musical, and I hadn't worked with these musicians before. House lights went down and the stage lights went up, and there was a fucking red light shining directly over my shoulder, at which point my chord chart just went completely blank. Over to you, Alan.
So I've got one. This must be about like 17 years ago. It's when I was still classed as a youth, and when I was playing with the Strathclyde Youth Jazz Orchestra, and it was doing an outdoor gig in Glasgow on George Square in the middle of winter. Yeah, not ideal. And it was so cold that I play quite an old saxophone. It was made in the kind of late 60s, early 70s. And for anybody who has seen saxophones, there's the key touches, which are usually like mother of pearl, so where your actual fingers go. It was so cold that the metal had contracted around one of the key touches and popped it out. Now it's an old sax, and it's quite valuable. So I was kind of scrambling around, and I've actually found you primed me about this as well, that you were going to ask me. That's the gig, and that's me trying to put the key touch back in. But you can see, like, everybody's wearing scarves. Everybody's like in big woolly overcoats, gloves, hats, and you can imagine the intonation was just, excuse the language, fucking appalling. Like, it was like the tuning was so bad because it was outdoors in the middle of winter. So yeah, I had to. So that was me repairing my saxophone in the middle of a gig, and it must have been about like 1 degree, like freezing cold. So I vowed at that point I would avoid doing outdoor gigs ever again, but also I would buy a spare. I'd buy a cheap saxophone, so I wasn't going to take that one out. And if anything like that happened, it didn't really matter. So yeah, that's my extreme weather condition. I'm going to have to tell you, mate, you're still on mute.
Sorry. I'm doing that because of the background noise. Yeah, I had to do a festival. I was depping again. It was amazing. I depped for loads of bands, and they never asked me back. Don't know why. Yeah, depping for this band, and I actually had rehearsed with them, and they explained to me the scenario for the festival and this, that, and the other. And they didn't really want me to have a bit of sheet paper in front of me. They thought it didn't look very good. So I thought, oh, this is an opportunity to buy some stationery. So I bought a ring bound notebook. Ring bound, you know, the ones with the little coils of, it's like a stretched out spring on the top. And I very deftly gaffered or duct taped that to the top of my keyboard, so that for every song I just turn a sheet. And I was actually quite impressed by this little kind of novel invention. I thought, why don't more people do this? Great, you could just do this, that, and the other. And then we arrived at the festival, and the festival was in the Isles of Scilly, which are famous for the number of shipwrecks, some of the biggest concentration of shipwrecks in the world. And that is because it's fucking windy. Now, under usual circumstances, you know, the power of wind to turn a page, it needs to be coming from a specific direction. But if you attach your paper to what is ostensibly a hinge, it's remarkably easy. And the band really, really enjoyed watching me, as every song we started, a gust of wind would come from behind the stage. It's an outdoor gig. And my charts would basically turn into a flip book. I think it's time for me to stop talking and invite some wonderful people in to chat about these things. Oh, that wonderful ping. Waffling away there. I hope everyone's all right. Excuse my red face. It is, as I said, I'm a recovering redhead, and I'm in France, and it's a heat wave. It's been about 38 all week, which is, I don't know what that is in old pence, but it's hot. I hope everyone's doing okay. So what we're talking about, throw out a couple of ideas there, is any professional regrets, whether it's missing a gig, not accepting a gig, saying no. I'd love to kind of balance up, see what the balance is between no and the regrets you had, which I'm probably more interested in, of saying yes, and or sacrifices that you have made. So any ideas there would be great. I'm just going to adjust my view so I can see tiled, yes. And then the other thing was, I was asked the question of, have I ever done gigs in adverse weather conditions? And I told a windy story. I've got a couple of holiday nightmares. I'm having a wonderful time in the Alps, but it's been eventful, to say the least. Something I would recommend not doing is when it's 38 degrees. I don't know if anyone could tell me what that is in Fahrenheit. It's high. I think it's late 90s, isn't it? If you're in France, particularly in the Alps, what I wouldn't recommend doing is, it's about 100 Fahrenheit. What I wouldn't recommend doing is going to a really crappy touristy cafe that's on the beach or on the lakeside where I am, where it's really hot, and ordering a steak tartare. It's the first time I've done what I did that night since I was wearing nappies, and I wish I was wearing a nappy that night. Oh, my wife was lying next to a lake of different sorts that night. So enjoy your dinner, everyone. Just going, oh man. I don't know. I think I'm subconsciously forcing my own retirement here. I don't know if I've got the right screen up for it. If anyone's got their hands up for, I'm okay now. But just don't eat raw minced beef from a cheap thing when it's 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It's terrible. But there's another quite unpleasant story as well. I don't think anyone's got their hands up at the moment. Another quite unpleasant story is I wear an apnea mask. It's incredibly attractive. It goes over my nose. And I'm also, because I smell like an Englishman made of English sausages, I attract a lot of airborne insects. Yeah, and I woke up this morning and there was a bee inside my apnea mask, and I'd already inhaled up my nostrils a large fly, which is still there. It's not alive, but there we go. So I'm never going on holiday ever again. Idris, thank you, mate. You've saved me. You're muted.
Hi, can I be heard? Yeah, great. You're a living legend, Christian. That is insane. Absolutely insane stuff. I just wanted to say the video you put out on you called it boring earlier, but the GUI and video, that was geek stuff. I really, really loved it, especially it was very interesting to see your influences in design. Like, I've always wondered what influences you in that sense, and what had influenced the Spitfire stuff and labs and stuff like that. Because for me, like the KSP manual and learning all that kind of stuff has been really cool, and I do like that stuff. But designing something that's great to use doesn't kind of like put off the user and doesn't get in the way. I think that's something that to be fair, like Spitfire and Crow Hill have nailed for me. It's difficult to get into some of the other stuff because of the heady stuff. There's some way that the stuff that you've been doing it's made it so that it doesn't get in your way. The stuff to do doesn't get in your way, right? So you can use it on a job and feel comfortable that you know what you're doing, right? And I really love that you're going to do a series on that stuff, because I think for the next generation of people who want to do the things that you've been doing, it's going to be very valuable to learn from someone like yourself, because I want to get into that stuff. I do love to. I am very interested in doing that kind of stuff for piano book and stuff. But I think what gets in my way is once I get the samples done, and which is not the hard part. For me, that's the easy part. Then the KSP manual, let's say I'm going contact route, then the KSP manual, then I've got it there. Then it's like, okay, what is this going to look like? And I really liked your approach of thinking, what is it going to look like beforehand? as well. Like it seemed like you were on all states of your creation process. You were aware of what you're trying to deliver and how useful this will be to the end user, and that's something I really learned from that video. So that was great watch for me.
Thank you, Idris. I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's interesting thinking about UIs where something that's virtual is concerned, but I'm a great believer in music being about feeling, and I think it's about how things make you feel. And I think that there's also another really useful term with businesses. Like when I used to run restaurants, I always made sure there are really nice nail brushes in the toilets because it's called a touch point. It's a point at which people interact with you. And I think there's a way of representing your personality and basically what things are for as well. And I think, you know, when you the whole reason why I pitched that idea to Spitfire of the labs GUI, which is something I'm really proud of, being really that simple, is we identified that people didn't fiddle with UIs because they looked scary. So it's like, well, that's the most, you know, the timbre thing, you know, which we use with our strings and orchestral libraries, is really important. We had a situation where we went to visit Patrick Doyle, who was using our samples, and he played us his demos, and they sounded awful. And really quiet. He said, I have to boost everything by like 20 dB. And we realized that he wasn't using the timbre control. So it's a method of communication like anything else. But also, if you're staring at these things all day, then, you know, I think they've got to look nice. I think the other thing, which again, it's not my it's not for me to say, but something that I'm aware of is I think that user interfaces tend to be terribly gendered. And I don't think that it's an accident that Ableton has a much larger group of female users. I mean, it's still relatively tiny, but if you look at the gender use of Ableton compared to Logic and Cubase, there is a correlation there between the way things look and some things just look like weaponry, which is just not, I believe, something that is as appealing to everyone. So those are my thoughts there. Jay, it's good to see you, mate. How are you? Can't hear you, mate. Oh, we've got to do a compilation of musicians and their patch bays.
Is that working? Is that working out? No? Yes? Okay, cool. I've been juggling things. My mom apparently broke her leg on Sunday, so that's been a thing. Anyway, what were we talking about? UIs. Yes. You know, I saw a comment a while ago on about, I don't know where, I don't remember where, but someone saying how a UI has to be like, it has to be invisible, like it can like be there. I'm like, what? I mean, yes, what Idris was saying, you know, like it has to get out of your way in a way, but does that have to prevent you from making it look nice? You know, that's kind of my take on it, is like, you have to, when you're working on a UI, in my head, like the way I saw it and the way I did mine, is like, just, it doesn't have to be so complicated, but it has to look cool as well. Because for me, going back to, like, you know, Labs and Spitfire and Crowhill, sometimes the UI will they either get me on an instrument or prevent me from using it. And not trying to talk bad about any one or the other, but sometimes, like orchestral tools, for example, I don't like the way it looks, and it really prevents me from using it because I just don't like the way that it looks. Does not make sense to me. Well, something like the BBCSO does, you know, like the Symphony Orchestra, it works. That makes sense to me. So I use it more than anything else because it makes sense visually.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Jay. I mean, it's got to be intuitive as well. You're paying for the functionality, and people sell these sample libraries. But you know, okay, it's got samples and it's got some great players, but it's got this functionality, and if you can't figure out how to use that functionality, I think it's I think
Yeah.
you're selling it short, really, and that's why I think FabFilter's done so well, because it's actually quite nice to see what on earth you're doing with a multi-band compressor,
Yes.
Whereas, like, arguably a much better suite of plugins is Sonox, and they're just foul to look at.
Right. Yeah. And for example, Waves, their old legacy looks, they look awful now. Like, they revamped everything, but you still have to pay for them. Anyway, not the point. They used to look really bad, really outdated, and until recently that they like did their new versions and their new plugins have really put out. But it's the UI has to really help it. Yes, it has to be invisible, as in not be confusing, but it's one thing being confusing and another thing being just boring. Just plain boring. Like, you don't want it to look like, like, okay, let's take this example. Like, decent sampler, when you at the very beginning you set up an instrument, it'll give you like this just little knobs, right? They function. Yeah, they work fine. They're not interesting to look at, but they're not meant to, because you do that part on your own.
Yeah.
So that's
and I think it's why people get turned off Contact as well, because when you open it, it's like it's not very friendly. I remember, like, this is going way back, when they released the Mellotron plugin, and this was in the days when things needed to sound like clean and this, that, and the other, and they just put a coffee ring on the GUI, and it was just a nice way of communicating. Don't expect this to sound any good. It sounds bad, but good bad. There's quite a few people with their hands up, Jay. So I'll move on to Lee. It's Lee or Lee? Lee.
Lee,
Yeah.
yes, that's right. Hello again.
Hi, mate.
So I had a few things. One with the UI thing, I agree with what everyone else said. And in regards to your video, I actually looked up the guy that you referenced for learning Contact and things, so that I can maybe develop what I'm looking to do for my first sample library, that kind of thing, which is a few weeks away. But that stuff like that really helps, because you wouldn't know where to go. Whereas when someone recommends something, that's really helpful. For what you said earlier about regrets, sort of stories, I don't have any myself musically, but if anything, for me, the issue is trying to avoid the regret of not trying to push myself to get involved in music. I think for me, the biggest regret would be not having stories like that to tell. So there's that way of looking at it too. So that's my kind of take on it. But I did have one thing to ask relating to the challenges. You mentioned about the one that's kind of being reissued again. I think that's quite helpful to kind of help us to understand the process of things. And I did have a question as to, now that you've set quite a few different challenges, how has that informed your perspective on in the view of giving briefs out? Because I know you've said a lot about experiences you've had receiving briefs and how there can be really good experiences and really bad ones. But I wonder, have you been quite surprised by how people have interpreted the challenges you put out, things like that? And how has that kind of changed your perspective, if at all, on that subject?
Yeah, I mean, something that we often discuss is whether we should hold hands more, and I say no. I mean, if anything, we're probably kind of in the middle area of experience, because sometimes the briefs are just awful. I don't know if I told this story. I'll try and be quick about it, but I had a guy. I was pitching for a Kodak commercial, and they actually came around to my studio to look at my thing. And I was down to the shortlist, and they really liked what I did. Kodak has a little mnemonic at the end, a little bit like, I don't know, McDonald's or Intel or whatever, Netflix. And they said, what? And it had been a really shitty brief as well, slightly racist brief, actually, a bit kind of, can you make it urban? One of those. It's a little bit like, I love it when people ask me to do African music, whole continent. Yeah, they said, "Oh, what do you play the mnemonic on?" I said, "Oh, it's on a Moog." And they went, "What's that?" I said, "Oh, it's like a vintage analog synth." And they went, "Okay, just an idea here, putting this out here. Can you play it on a drum kit?" I said, yeah, I mean, it's a melodic mnemonic. I said, you can, um, but it wouldn't have any melody of the mnemonic. It would just have rhythm. And this guy just went, no rhythm, just melody, but on a drum kit, which was a bit of a challenge. 2 years later, I was asked into Leo Burnett, which is a massive advertising agency, and they'd identified a problem with poor briefing of composers. And these were in the days where you would have to pay people to pitch. So they were forking out tens of thousands of pounds and not getting the briefs back correctly hit. So I went to do a seminar about how to pitch to composers, and I decided to tell that story. And I was sitting with music supervisor Matt Biffer, and after the seminar, I went, that went well, but that story that you started saying about Kodak, was it me, or did you just not get to the end of that story? Did you just kind of taper off? What was all that about? I went, the dude's clearly moved agencies and he was sitting at the end of the fucking table. So I just saw this guy just going, this guy's talking about me. Oh, jeepers. I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking about that. Sorry about that, Lee. So yeah, try and offer realistic experiences. But what it is helping me do is I've got a real kind of reignited passion in what this channel is for, with the type of content that I'm making. And the really nerdy thing is you're absolutely right, that's the direction I'm going to go in with this channel. And I think, if I can be so bold, and that doesn't apply to everyone here, but as a generalization, I think the real Achilles heel for music makers in our kind of corner, which tends to be more media composery people than producers, the real Achilles heel is production and engineering, and people's reticence about that. I suspect it's because a lot of producers tend to, I think, come up through technical stuff working with computers, whereas a lot of media composers tend to come from playing music. So a lot of producers are like, whoa, reading music, very scary, not realizing you don't have to. And a lot of media composers are, multi-band compressor, terrifying. So that's something that's, I think, really helpful with these challenges for us. I'm waffling, and there's loads of people with their hands up. Elliot, I will shut up.
That was, I can't imagine being in the room when you realise the person's there. God.
I have actually broken a sweat telling you that story.
I just thought I'd put my thing about regrets, because I think like a lot of people, composers, we're kind of introverts. I think one of my biggest regrets is not having the confidence to take advantage of a situation that I'm in, and like to not have the confidence to say something to someone that, it might lead to anything. But I don't know, it's like something I feel like you just kind of, you have to just say, like, who cares? Like, just, you don't know until you ask, kind of thing. And I've been signed off work for the last couple of weeks with a damaged hip, and it's given me a lot of chance to kind of sit and think and like kind of reminisce and think like, what would I change? What would I do different? And it's given me a real kick in the ass to actually like do stuff, to think like, oh, actually, like, I've been wanting to make, like, from your inspiration, to make a YouTube channel for ages, to put yourself out there, that kind of stuff. So I've got, like, my room is set up now. I've done 1 or 2 videos. I'm trying to actually make this kind of stuff, and just to have the confidence when you're in situations to just talk to someone. Like, there's a week or two ago, I was with my wife shooting a wedding at a really lovely venue down here in Essex, and it was running late, as they always do. And they had a string quartet, and they were sat in this nice big kind of like chamber room with just the quartet. And it was just me and they were them, and it was being delayed 10 minutes. So I was just, like, 2 years ago, I would have just walked out and not said anything, but I actually made the effort to say hello and talk to them, and then say, like, this sounds weird, but I've never actually been in a room this close with violinists. Could you show me what it actually sounds like from pianissimo to fortissimo, and why, when you play that, do you split the chord in this way between the viola and the cello and all that kind of stuff? And it's just so interesting to just have conversations. But yeah, I think the lack of confidence sometimes is such a big killer and causes a lot of regret for people. It's yeah.
And I think that I've been so honoured to meet so many composers, and I would say more composers than not. have social anxiety. There's a reason we shut ourselves in rooms and learn how to play guitars. It's the only way we're ever going to get a shag.
It didn't work for me.
Yeah, it's becoming
Did in the end.
becoming a rock god. But I think, or goddess. I think that it is something that has to be overcome, but not overcome alone. And I think that there's two things I want to pick up on what you said. One is, if you are struggling with these things, simply ask for help. Be honest with people. But I think what Jaws did for the sea for a generation, Oliver Twist did for us, asking for shit and or suggesting shit. And this is a really new thing that I've picked up on is you're not going to get a whole bunch of people going more when you just go, I did it recently. I said, listen, I'm quite good at this. If you need any help with this for a big production, and they haven't come back to me, but I don't feel cripplingly embarrassed, because I have over the last couple of years asked for help because I've really, really needed it on many, many different levels.
Yeah.
And one thing I did was ask for an investor to come on board for Crow Hill, and it was just, thankfully, it wasn't me and me being hard and brave. It was my family who said, just what are you going to lose? Just ask. And he came on board as a co-founder, and I'm looking forward to announcing that very soon.
It's hard when there's like those kind of things you have to just kind of discover for yourself, or be in a situation for it to come through. But I feel like playing instrument really helped. In fact, going on to your thing about gigs in like bad situations, I had a gig when England lost the semi-final to France, 2-3 years ago. We had an outside gig on that day at a pub in their beer garden. And not only did we have to play in the I think it was like -4 or something. It got so cold that the intonation screws on my guitar saddles started vibrating loose. My intonation started going. The drum kit started falling apart. My Helix floorboard that I used for my amp modeling, the screws started vibrating out of them for the drum kit was vibrating. And trying to play the Sweet Child of Mine solo when you can't wear gloves and you can't feel your hands it was challenging. But yeah, all good experiences, I suppose.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast recently, and someone was talking about the 10,000 hours and how you get your experience by making mistakes. And it was James Blunt, actually, and he was talking about how he talked about how these poor sods on like stuff like America's Got Talent and X Factor and all of this stuff have to learn and make their mistakes in public, like to a huge audience. Whereas he spent 3 years in dodgy North London like pubs with like 2 guys and a whippet listening to him, and that's where he made his mistakes and learned from them. But they're so valuable, and the more you make, and the more that you understand, it's a little bit like launching a rocket. The more you understand that if it will go wrong, if it can go wrong, it will. How to mitigate against that, I think, is only one way of learning, and it's the painful way, unfortunately. But thanks for that, Elliot. Mark, how are you?
Hello, Christian. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm good. I've been away traveling and stuff, trying to tune into these. I just wanted to follow on from what Idris said about your video on the GUIs. I thoroughly enjoyed it as well, because I don't think people realize how much work goes into doing that stuff properly. And I absolutely loved it to bits. And it's not just the design. I think there's two things. There's not much I can comment on these podcasts that I'm qualified to, but one of my companies makes software and has done for years. And obviously that involves a graphical user interface. It also has an output that goes onto big screens. And they work, and they've always worked, because we understand the why. Why does it do what it does? And so the stuff that goes on the big screen, you can't judge it by what's in front of you, because that's never how it's going to be viewed by the audience. So that part of it, you have to go and view from 30 feet across the room on a big screen. And as far as the interface, in our particular thing, we've always had this feature, which is if you want it to do something, poke it with your finger. If you want it to stop doing that, poke it again. And the thing about your interfaces is exactly what we do with that, which is consistency. Across there, if you look at one of your graphical user interfaces and then you go to another one, you know what it's going to do because there's this consistency in the design. And that's not easy to do when you're making several different products. It's sort of a bit easier, I guess, with Volts because they are similar. But when you do that with other products that aren't so similar, you know, the you know, Venom is a good example. How do you make that interest? I mean, oh, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's a bit busy, that one. But
Yeah,
thank
but
you,
it
Mark.
works. It works, and you know, and just very quickly, following on from asking, I remember years ago going to a business conference, and I was sitting there in a room with like 2,000 people, big auditorium, and this business guy was on the stage, and he said, "Could somebody bring me a pen?" And somebody ran out of the audience and put a pen on the front of the stage. And he said, "Could somebody bring me some paper?" And somebody ran out, and he went through this long list of things that he asked for. And then he went, "Could I have a lady's bra?" And some woman did the thing that women know how to do with removing the bra and put it on the stage. And by this point, we're all going, "What the hell's going on here? This is..." And he said, "People will give you whatever you want. You just have to ask." And I've never forgotten it because it's true. Just ask. The worst that someone can say is no.
Yeah. I mean, just to go a bit nuanced on that, I think going back to Oliver Twist, I think that maybe on reflection, what Oliver Twist should have done is said, "If I polish your shoes, sir, can I have some more?" And I think that that's the key thing, is it's not just asking, "Can you give me a job?" Or "I really want to do this." Or particularly something I hear all the time is, "I really want to do your job." It's like, well, that's a bit scary.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
And that's where the Shawshank Redemption is a much better example, because he takes a big risk by listening in on a conversation, but he goes, "I think I can get something for myself by offering something up that they really need."
Do you trust your wife? Yeah, exactly. I think you're exactly right. I mean, I've been in business many years, and I was talking to someone the other day and saying that in the, I guess, 20 years I've been in business, how many people do you think have ever phoned me or sent me an email and said exactly what you said? "I've got something I'd love to do for you. Do you have a job?" And the answer is none, not one, zero. And if
Life
someone did
insurance.
phone me, if someone did phone me and said, "Hey, I've looked at what your company does, looks amazing, I'd love to get involved doing X, Y, Z," I'd find them a job. That's the truth of the matter. If they could offer something. Yeah, Jay's doing some cool stuff for us at the moment.
Well, that's great to hear.
So yeah, I think just ask. Don't be afraid. The worst that someone can say is no, or no, not right now, but thanks for reaching out.
Yeah, and often we'll remember you in the future. Don't burn those bridges when you do get a negative response. Just to touch on, before I go to you, Noah, just to touch on something you said is, where talking about graphical user interface is concerned, do they matter? Well, just look at history and look at what IBM did for the personal computer industry by inventing the mouse, and the Windows thing that Apple then nicked, and then Microsoft then nicked. But it totally revolutionized everything. And this is a graphical user interface put behind a pane of glass. So you just need to look at that example and go, does it matter? Yes, it does. It really does matter. It's fundamental. Noah.
Hey there. A couple of things. The GUI video, it's very insightful. Kind of continuing that train. I found a unique opportunity where a local library of mine has a full-on music studio that they've built in their basement, and they have this piano there that I'm going to look at booking to try to make my own sample library. And so I was like trying to figure out how to make it not just look like some sort of, I don't know, like plain interface. But yeah, and then when it comes to regrets, honestly, I was thinking about it, and I would have to say probably not putting anything out there for the longest time, even if you feel like the ideas might not be the best. I feel like, because I've just started putting out stuff finally after years of working on music, and I feel like it actually held me back by waiting so long until I thought I had some sort of perfect product that I could put out there. And when I finally put it out, it was almost an immediate thought of, I should have done this so long ago.
Yeah, oh man. I mean, I think it's like an invert procrastination at perfectionism. It's just, there's two things that are real red flags with collaborators with me is perfectionism, and also it's a funny kind of. I think there's a corollary to it because there's a fear factor in it, but contempt before investigation is just something that it just kills. It's the biggest buzzkill, and my view as an entrepreneur is try it, but make sure you try it as cheaply as possible. Don't let your ego run away with you, but just try it. Just try it, see how it go, and you find out very, very quickly. And the same applies to putting stuff out there. No such thing as perfect. No such thing as perfect. And it's the imperfections that we love. And it's the imperfections that people are going to be really going for over the next few years. I absolutely guarantee it. I heard a lovely chat about AI. I don't want to get onto AI, but it's just talking about imperfections and feelings and how important they are. It was Nick Cave talking about AI, and he goes, what we do is we find in music and lyrics relatability. So you're telling me you're going to write a song, you want to write a song about your grandma dying, and you're going to ask computer to write it for you. Well, that was really good. Quite a simple thing there. Nick, I'll come back to you, Jay, just to give everyone a go. Nick, how are you doing?
Hey guys, good to see everybody getting sunburnt and whatnot. Yeah, it's tough. I've been nursing a stomach ulcer, so I've been kind of staying away from everything. Yeah, but it's nerves induced. Absolutely nothing else. I've been keeping a good diet for a while, and haven't been drinking at all, really, the past year or so. And so to regrets is, my sole regret is just freaking out about stuff that's absolutely unnecessary, like worrying about potential outcomes that may or may not ever come to fruition, or doubting myself when it comes to like feedback from clients or this, that, and the other. That kind of fucks with your health at the end of the day. It's real. So just do first, think later kind of thing, because there's no point in just eating yourself alive, I guess, from the inside with that. So that's kind of my point. But on a lighter note, I'm doing this corporate thing for an automotive brand. I mean, it's not necessarily corporate, it's kind of creative and fun, but it's under NDAs, so can't say a whole lot. But the Volt's rubber bridge guitar came through really well, and I used it actually as this kind of never-ending pad that sounds absolutely magnificent. Basically what I did was because it's a plucky sound, right? So I just took those plugs and I put a Sound Toys Space Bender, which is this basically infinite reverb on it, and it created like the the most magical pad sound ever. Just sort of just held chords going from one to the next, and it was just gorgeous. Because a few people, I shared it with, going like, what's that synth? So yeah. So there's that.
That's great stuff. To lead on from what you said, I heard the most brilliant quote the other day. I'm going to misquote it. I've written it down, and I don't know who said it. Dark days begin with dark thoughts, and I think that is something that you can actively change. I don't want to go on to the whole addiction thing, but something that you learn in a lot of these addiction therapeutic kind of fellowships and stuff is gratification lists. And I think I would really recommend it. If you've got a big day ahead of you, just sit down and write 10 things that you're grateful for that morning. It's the first 4 or 5 really easy. Then you will really have to search. And it will be the little things. And that's just one way of not beginning a day with dark thoughts, which in turn often leads to a dark day. I often think starting the day with a bit of Stevie Wonder always helps. 10 zillion light years away. That's something I always listen to before a big session. Just takes me out of myself. It's good. Back to you, Jay.
Well, since we're on that point, are we ever gonna talk about stationery, Christian? Because listen, I have notebooks, too many notebooks, and I think we need to open that conversation one day. Because I have so many. Okay, wait. We're getting there. Oh my God. Okay. However, before we get into that one, oh my God. Okay, listen. Before we get into that, permission to self-promote. Can I? May I? All right. So, for Noah and everyone else, if you guys need help with the UI, I've designed my own, and it's for decent sampler. It's not as complicated as it looks. So anyone that needs help, I'm open for that. And also, and because this is kind of tied to the regret, I will regret not doing this. I've been noticing really that I've been shifting into a lot of more post-production type of things. So, and this comes to a question. If you guys need help with like production, like mixing, like the post of your music, I'd be happy to help anybody. I've been really doing a lot of re-recording mixing and stuff like that, for short films and stuff, like less music, more post, and I really like it. So I'm really trying to do more of that. So yeah, hi, if you need
There
help.
you go.
And here comes my question in a very, I'm gonna throw the conversation to another side, but Christian, I would love to know. So in a, say for example, a series you're doing, I don't know, Top Gear or Inside Number 9, once you're done, what do you deliver? Like, I've always had this part of the technical side really floating around, and I cannot find the questions. What do you give who once you're done?
That's a great question. Basically, delivery requirements are stated in the contract. It can vary. I think I mentioned that I worked on which I'm still NDA'd on, so I can't talk about it. I worked on a really massive project. It was 2.5 years, multi-episodic thing for a big streamer. Finished it this Christmas. I finished it 2 years ago. Still hasn't aired, and we're still fulfilling deliverable requirements. So basically what you deliver is you deliver to the dub final mix and then stems. The final mix needs to be a sum of the stems, so that when your dubbing mixer puts your stems into Unity, it needs to create the final mix that you have created. It's a really important point. This is why it's really difficult for us to use things like bus compressors and all of that kind of stuff. You have to set up all sorts of side chains. And it was, until relatively recently, really, it was a tough part of the process because you had to have a different reverb chain for each and every stem. And since the digitalization of the dubbing process, I think the average number of stems will be maybe between 15 and 20 different stems. Those will usually be 5.1, but most of what we can deliver is 5.0. So it's quite a lot of data that needs to go. And then there will be delivery requirements. Sometimes that's sheet music. So I had to get everything transcribed. 24 parts, 2 times 24 episodes, totally transcribed into music. They used to have like old tech stuff, like everything needs to be backed up and archived on a Tascam DA88. And eventually, like, music supervisors went, oh, come on, guys, stop this. So it changes the technology. I used to have to deliver stuff on time-coded DATs, which were really expensive. So I always, when I was delivering to a dub, I'd rent in a time-coded DAT machine. But yeah, that's basically it. The fundamental of what you have to deliver to the dub is a full mix and a series of stems with everything all separated out. And the final mix is the sum of those stems, not a mix. So you have to mix within the stems. So that's the basic answer. I'm sure people want to add to that. Moy, how are you doing, sir?
Hey, hi there. I'm well. Hoping everybody's okay. So I do have one of those vacation stories. I was sitting in a vacation in Ocean City, there at the beach. And then all of a sudden I feel this warm liquid in my neck. And I thought, that's great, warm water. A second later, I was like, no, with my luck, I know it's bird shit. So yeah, it's just, it's my luck. But, as far as regret, I have one regret. As a matter of fact, while you were talking about that, the CD was right here. This guy was the worst singer ever. It was 1996, my first gig. It was Logic 2.0. This singer was so bad. He was so bad that the producers who recorded him before me used to threaten his kids. If you don't behave, I'm going to lock you in a room and make you listen to this guy because he was so bad. But, like Noah, I think one of my problems as well is having that perfect sound. Perfection, I think it's a problem because if it doesn't sound good, you don't want to put out there. In some, platforms like DistroKid, it's like $2.50 per month. You can upload your music. But like being like me, a perfectionist, and waiting for the right moment, you'll always have this delay, procrastination. And I think it's a problem with a lot of musicians that you don't have to have the perfect sound. You just have the courage to just upload your music. And if it sucks, it sucks. And if it doesn't, people will tell you, hey, it sounds good.
Here. I won't recite the lyrics because people will find out who it is. But I worked with a perfectionist, and he wrote a song about how he split up with a girlfriend because she never told him that she liked a particular form of music that had just come into fashion. So let's refer to it as big step. Not big step, big beat, which lasted for about 6 months in the 1990s. And the song was called Claire Likes Big Beat. And he's still recording different versions of that 25 years later with this kind of totally time-based reference. And it's just absurd. And I think it's paralyzing. Absolutely. So I wanted to say I'm going to add to dark days begin with dark thoughts. Disgusting anecdotes begin with the words warm liquid. Sorry. It never ends well when the word's not warm liquid. So it's hot cup of tea, it's fine, but warm liquid, never good. Idris, back on that note, Idris, back to you.
Well, that is hilarious, Moy. Absolutely hilarious. I wanted to touch on a few things. But I wanted to ask you a question, Christian, after I mentioned Some of the stuff that you're talking about to do with deliverables, I noticed in some BFI contracts, which seems to be quite a bit of what I get doing short films in UK. They still got this weird thing in the contract about that you're saying, like being backed up to tape and stuff like that kind of stuff there. But it's like a copy and paste thing you can see in the contract. And obviously sometimes I've gone back and forth with producers in removing some of that stuff, or just getting our deliverables down to stuff that makes sense for the era, right? But I wanted to ask you a question about streaming stuff. This is specifically to do with your music. Like, there's a film of yours that I watched that I really loved the music on, but I can't find it anywhere. Like, I can't find the score anywhere. It's called Uninvited. It's this Sky thing to do with these red caps that basically yeah. I can't find it.
We tell you what, we never made a record of that because it was an interesting investment deal where Spitfire owns the publishing.
Oh, interesting. That makes sense now.
Yeah.
No problem.
Thanks, mate. Charles, nice to see you.
I had to leave for a little bit because I took a phone call from my daughter, and when I came back, it sounded like your through theme really had to do with risk. And maybe 2 weeks ago, I had a young lady in here. I'm helping her with her film, and I'm going to score it. And she is a trained actress, and you know about my career in acting. And we discussed something which is really analogous to that business of risk. I don't know if she was having trouble with one of the actors or whatever, but I said the biggest problem that I've ever seen, because I've coached actors, and I've had this problem myself, so it isn't like I perfected it, but that's nonsense. I've had the same problem with music and with acting, and that is giving yourself permission. And as a musician, I can recall several instances in my career when I was playing trombone in studios and live where my uncertainty was like a ball and chain, as opposed to play the note and let her rip. I remember as a boy and I believe I've told this story before, but he was right. This was a great lesson. The guy who directed our big band in our high school, it was a jazz band. You know, we had, I think, 4 trombones, 4 trumpets, playing in that era, playing things like Kenton charts and some old Glenn Miller stuff. So the first gig that I had where I had to play lead trombone was at a military school in Venice, Florida, which I don't even know if it still exists. So we're playing this gig, and we come up to this one chart, and Andy, who was my quote unquote boss, my teacher, turned around and said, "Charlie, when we play the such and such, you play the solo." And I almost had a nervous breakdown because I thought, and he could see it, the blood just drained from my face. And I'm not talking about a red solo, I'm talking about improvising. This was an up-tempo jazz thing, whatever it was. He could see the blood drain from my face, I'm sure of it. And he turned around and looked at me and said, "They're not listening. Those people out there are trying to get," if you know what I mean, in their romance, "play anything that comes to your mind, even if you're wrong, but you've got to do it." I mean, the guy had been in World War II and been badly wounded, so he wasn't afraid to give an order. "You've got to do it." Obviously, I don't remember what the tune was or how I played and whatnot, but it was a great lesson that I didn't appreciate at the time. But as I got older, I say that same thing to myself sometimes when I'm even narrating an audiobook. But I say it to the younger actors, and I'm saying it to all of us to remind ourselves, we have to give ourselves permission. Because, and here's the thing, I think the audience is just as afraid as the person who performs. Even when I would go to see the Los Angeles Philharmonic, I was apprehensive, even if I knew if they were playing Respighi's Pines of Rome or something. I was apprehensive because I knew what had to happen, and I was afraid for the musicians, as brilliant as they were. So courage, I guess. What is the French? There's a French word, élan or something like that, about, charge forward or whatever. So take the risks, because the people who are the observers are just as afraid as you are. Even, I don't know if this is true for you, Christian, but I'm going to put money that it's probably true. Your clients, which are probably more premium than my clients, I'm sure, when they come into a room and they have expectations of what you're going to deliver, I think they're scared. They're scared of how will the audience react? How will their boss react? How will the people who are putting up the money react? So they're just as apprehensive as you. And I don't know if your mother ever told you about auditioning, but I think she might have said at some point, when I auditioned, the people in the room I was auditioning for were afraid that I wouldn't be the answer. And when you take that in and you realize, okay, the person that you're presenting to is afraid, then you must overcome their fear, and you must overcome your own fear and charge ahead. Because unless we are dealing with surgery or something of that nature, so what? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Something my mother used to do when she was in the chorus line to get noticed. I don't know, she was a very beautiful woman and stuff, but she was dancing alongside a lot of other beautiful women. My mum was always quite kind of petite, and she was dancing along, a lot of women who had kind of, and this is her own like brain here, with longer legs, who are better dancers, this, that, and the other. So what she did is she used to tie her dancing shoes on very loose, so that when she did a high kick, her shoe would come off and fly into the audience. And it would immediately sponsor the nurture response from the audience, who would kind of go, oh, good on her. She's going for it. I'm not recommending that we throw our shoes at clients, but, well, we could try. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I'll never forget, something that really sums up the nervousness. I remember doing a film with some quite esteemed producer and director, David Furnish, Elton John's husband. And I'll never forget, they were sitting behind me, and I did the first kind of run through screening, and it was, a bit nerve-wracking. And I got the sense that things were going really, really badly, because all I could hear was the clicking of pens, which meant that basically it was like literally every time a cue started, I'd hear their pens click, and it's like they're writing down notes. This is just, it's going to be like they're going to serve me a Bible of what's wrong with the soundtrack. And I turned around and I went, right, who's first then? And they went, oh no, we really loved it. And then I looked on the table and I realized I had a big bowl of pistachio nuts. And because they were kind of nervous and really egging me on, they weren't clicking pens. They were just opening the pistachio nuts and eating them. But I mean, it was really a signal of they wanted it to be good. They don't want it to be bad. I mean, the story that I started with at the beginning was, when you're dealing with narcissists, egomaniacs and psychopaths, all bets are off. And this guy definitely falls into that category. And he wanted the worst for me, because I was a narcissistic injury to him, at the behest of his film, which is extraordinary. And it's why so often, whilst there are definitely successful narcissistic directors, it's usually the collaborative directors who really get ahead. I mean, a great example is, Francis Ford Coppola, who's made as many bad films as good. But Jesus, look at his last film, where we had no one saying no. It's just, you know, those that whatever it is, 4.5 weeks long, that film, you'll never get those weeks back. Let's end with you, Dex. It's nice to see you.
Hello again.
Hello.
Hopefully on audio without having to change patch base.
If that's one thing this podcast is getting us to do, is we're getting so much better at our patch base.
Absolutely. I was just thinking back to what Charles was saying, and I was a teacher, secondary school, for 12 years. I think you get less for murder, but anyway, the point I was thinking was a lot of children just take that on the chin, that I'm just going to do it. I'm going to have a go. And if you give them the inspiration to do that, they will just run with it. And why, as adults, do we lose that to some extent? Why do we go, oh, no, I might not? But as kids growing up, if I was teaching somebody something and they loving it, they just run with it and they suddenly become brilliant. Final point to help you out on your introduction story about nappies. West Country Cider did it for me. There you go.
Scrumpy, terrible stuff. I'm going to satisfy Jay's inquiry about stationery. I'm a big fan of Kaweco. I'm a doodler, and I've been doodling something that I'm going to say this ad nauseum, time and time again. Halt. It's the best thing I've learned since going into recovery. Whilst bouts of depression, bipolar, personality disorders, grief, these things are much deeper and require, a lot more attention and stuff. But if there's a way of, oh look, you got your pen, lovely. If there's a way of dealing with stuff, a bit better, where you're possibly, you don't even know that your mental state isn't in great shape, is just to ask yourself halt, which is hungry, angry, lonely, tired. If you're hungry, stop what you're doing and eat something. If you're angry, go for a walk. If you're lonely, ask for help, ring someone up. And if you're tired, switch your fucking computer off and go to bed. On that note, I will share with a French flavour. I'm drinking a Coke Zero. My sobriety is sponsored by Coke Zero, by the way. And they've got these new personalised things, and this one has that. Amours. So with lots and lots of love to you all from the Alps in France. Don't eat steak tartare during a heat wave at a shitty cafe. On that note, much love. See you next week.
If you feel like you are losing your grip, might suffer a trip or abandon ship, open a can of whatever you sip